Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Prep Talk podcast hosted by myself, Pete Flips, and Nick Spizak. Today, we welcome on one of the staples of the Amazon community. He really doesn't need an introduction, but we're going to give him one anyways.
What's up? What's up? What's up? Long overdue.
What was that?
Long overdue.
Long overdue. True. We held out on AlloutAmzon, Garrett. Garrett started, as many of you know, in OA, and then moved over into Wholesale, and now is helping folks online get started with their Amazon businesses. So, Garrett, thank you for coming on.
What's going on, guys? Pleasure's all mine.
All right, Garrett. So we're going to do something a little different on this one. So everyone's heard the origin story of going through on various different podcasts. So we're going to do it a little bit different with this one. Tell us a little bit about your favorite Miles story from the early days. I think a lot of folks will know you as you guys have grown over the years. Let's go back to the beginning on that aspect of things, more on the personal side, how you guys got to meet and why it's such a good relationship and how you guys work together.
So I'll start with my favorite story, and I've told this story before, so it'll definitely resonate with some people. Once you hear it, it just makes so much sense. This actually was the first time Danny, myself, and Miles all got together to record. The first couple episodes, if you notice, if you go way back in the archives, they're in my living room at the time. And we cranked out like 3 or 4 episodes. You could see the sun going down in the background over the span of 3-4 episodes. But anyways, Miles actually was the first one at the house. Forget what I was doing. I think I was coming back from the warehouse, whatever it was. Miles was the first one there. He beat all of us. And as I'm pulling down the road, it's a side residential street. As I'm pulling down the road, I see like something in the middle of the grass. I had a big front lawn, right? Freshly cut. I see something in the middle of the lawn. As I get closer, I realize it's a person, right? As I get closer to the house, I realize it's Miles. He's basking. And mind you, I had a big backyard. I had a deck. I had private space in the back. He's plopped in the middle of the front yard, shoes off, shirt off, just basking for everyone to see in the middle of the front yard in a residential neighborhood. So that was probably almost 3 years at this point. That was probably within the first 4 to 5 months of kind of like how we met, how we, started to build the relationship that we have now, business and personal relationship. He was actually, it's been a long ride, but yeah, that was one of the first stories that resonates.
Very cool.
So what were some of, like, I don't want to go too far into the early days, but what were some of the trials and tribulations that you had to go through to kind of get to the point that you are now? And what do you like? How do you think that has set you up to have success?
Yeah, so it was interesting. So I actually, in the very beginning, the thing that probably held me back the most was capital. I had dug in pretty quickly in terms of like the analytics, the processes, the fluency of the data, right? How everything works on the back end. That's kind of where I started. And that allowed me to kind of scale to max capacity pretty quickly. But I was young. I was right out of college. I didn't have a lot of credit built up. Like there were a lot of hindrances in terms of like the capital that I was about that could expand into the business. So I mean, I was just rearing an itch to spend more, and so that was probably the main restriction, and frustrating at that. Because at the time, obviously, it was me, Danny, and Miles doing a lot of the work, and they were able to spend way more than I could. But we're all sourcing the same sorts of leads, and obviously the accumulation of our efforts is something that gets talked about a bunch today. But that was the biggest friction in the beginning, was just kind of working through. And some of the people that are going to listen to this will resonate, right? Because they're probably college students, high school students, whatever the case may be, with not that much capital built up, right? And so, man, that was beyond frustrating and something I talk about a bunch is really at the macro level of this business, it's only going to come down to 2 variables in terms of the success. It's data, processes, and then capital, right? You need both. You can't be successful without both. You can be really, really good with one, but without the other, right? For example, you can be the best source, the best reverse source, manual source, whatever the case may be. You could have all the data fluency in the world. But in my case, right, if you don't have the capital, if you don't have the fuel, the oil to put on the fire, it's not going to go anywhere, right? But on the other hand, if you have the capital, which a lot of people do, that's a real advantage in my mind in this business, but you don't have the fluency, right? Again, you're not going to get off the ground. So you need both. And the person that I see nowadays that has the capital, maybe 35, 45 years old, older, maybe built a corporate career that maybe they're trying to, itch away from. the advantage is massive, right? Because the harder part for a lot of people is the capital. The easy part to learn, because so much content is out nowadays, is the data. How do you source? How do you identify a good product? How do you identify the bad product? And how to work through that process of, okay, what's a good lead and how to find that lead and iterate that over and over and over and over and over again, right? So once you can combine both of those aspects, whichever direction, whichever order you do, then you're ready for success. And I think back in the day, because the capital piece is just naturally a little bit harder to come by, that's kind of what slowed and created a lot of friction early on.
So lots to unpack there. What are some of the levers that you ended up pulling that allowed you to get more access to capital?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I was operating with as much speed as possible, right? So I worked a 9 to 5 back then. And luckily enough, Southeastern PA, a lot of folks will resonate with this, is we have a bunch of assets in terms of like stores to hit up, right? We have 2 big Nike outlets. We have Marshalls, TJ Maxx every corner, Burlington Coat Factory, everywhere you could imagine you can spend money. So I had a route. After I would get off, sign off at 5:30. I worked remote, lucky enough. I would do my route, the same route every night. Outlet, Marshalls. I had the same route. And I would do that every single day. And so that allowed me, and I figured that out super quick, that allowed me to expedite my money process just a bit to make it more valuable. The other thing I did was FBM'd everything. Right? This was FBM before FBM was like a buzzword, right? And so again, I learned quickly that the time it takes to send stuff to FBA, have it get checked in, that whole process takes a lot of time. Whereas I can source something I know is going to move. I've proven it moves, right? And then just keep compounding, right? As a beginner, especially if a beginner that doesn't have a ton of confidence in the business, you don't need confidence when you can replace that confidence with data, empirical data, right? I can test 2, 3, 4, 5 units of a particular product I don't really know works super well. I don't care, because that's going to cost me $50 to exist in the marketplace, to iterate in the marketplace. And then if that sells a couple times, well, I know I've proven. I didn't need the confidence to make that decision. Now I can iterate. Now I can buy 10 more, 15 more, 20 more, whatever the case is. And so you can operate at a really high efficiency with a lot of productivity without necessarily the confidence that takes years to develop and build for yourself. Because everyone's going to kind of develop that confidence early, because everyone has a different risk tolerance, right? The 40-year-old with 2 kids and a wife and everyone's depending on them is a lot more risk averse, I think is the word I'm going for, as compared to like the recent grad that is living by himself in an apartment that costs $1,000 per month, right? Those are 2 different people, 2 different life scenarios. And so everyone kind of has to feel out and develop that confidence, because confidence is now correlated with risk tolerance. All those things are related. And so for me back then, all right, getting back to your question, it was really working with speed, RA, FDM, and then it was super irresponsible. I would be at the register, like looking at my credit cards, seeing how much was in the bank account, literally about next in line, transferring over and pay money to pay off a credit card that I was about to use and max out again. Right, personal, business, it was all commingled. It was a mess, but it was something I had to do out of necessity to keep that snowball going, because I knew the momentum. Again, once you build momentum, you have to do everything in your power to not let it go ever. And so that was just kind of what I was doing back then. And I just continued to iterate over months and months and months until I can have the luxury to operate with a little more, I guess slowness is the word, right? To FBM and OA, a lot of these things that just take naturally longer, you can earn that right once you just have some dirt under your fingers.
Yeah, Garrett. So there's a couple things I want to unpack on that, right? So, and it's something that you'll see for each of the different new sellers that come through. Are you time rich and cash poor, or are you cash poor and time rich? And it seems to be one of those things where it's hard to have that balance where you're time rich and you're cash rich, and that's like the unicorn of the bunch. Now, you've been on the record on the BuyBoxBandits of having the back and forth of FBM versus FBA, going through like, should I be a prep center or should we be using FBM? How do you look at that in terms of? I'm assuming you give that advice depending on the particular person. So kind of walk through that a little little bit.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things. I mean, it's always going to be a personal scenario, right? There's no one size fits all equation. Again, going back to the example before, right? That 40-year-old with 2 kids that values going to those soccer games, practices, whatever the case may be, going out date nights with your wife. Well, they value your time a lot different than, again, the high school or the college kid that complains they have no time, but that time is being spent drinking and playing video games, whatever. Right? So those are 2 different people that you obviously have to be self-aware enough to realize, okay, this is what I want to do. I value it more than thing X, Y, and Z. I'm going to act accordingly and align my priorities to make sure that that is resembled by the daily activity, right? So it's first and foremost, what are your priorities, right? Maybe you are that 40-year-old that wants to grind, right? And maybe the family, or maybe there's no family in place, or whatever the case may be, right? And that's fine, right? That's the decision that they have to make. But again, step one is having the self-awareness to be like, okay, do I want this or do I not? And how does this compare to everything else I'm doing in my life, right? So that's kind of step one. And then going back to your question, right? For me, Prep Center has to be the answer if you are away, right? Because the value of FBMing is the speed and the flexibility, especially with a new seller. With RA, you have the luxury, the flexibility to list something same day. You have the luxury to, I mean, as bad as to return things that don't potentially work, right?
Yeah.
You have the luxury to list 2, 3, 4 times cross-listed on the same product, which diversifies you and spreads out that risk and exposure, right? You're essentially active on 4 different listings at once, right? We did that back in the day. And so there's a lot of luxuries that you earn by being willing to FBM. Some of those are lost with the 3, 4, 5, 6 days that it takes to away, right? It makes a difference, right? If you're going to really capitalize and focus on the speed, you might as well take advantage of it, right? Mm-hmm. The other thing is, with OA, a lot of times you get stuck, depending on the state, paying taxes, right? With RA, a lot of times you can get away with that resale certificate, even if you're in a sales tax state. But with OA, you're kind of shot, right? And so you have to pay sales tax. Now your sourcing is harder, right? You're adding an extra 5, 6, 7, potentially 8% of buy cost on every single thing, right? That makes sourcing harder. And so if you're going to make the decision to buy something online, dealing with all these other variables, dealing with the slower time period, well, you might as well send it somewhere else where you don't have to see it again, right? And that's just kind of my thing, is if you're going to RA, you might as well FBM that. If you're going to OA, well, you might as well Prep Center that, right? Because now you can, as things are getting shipped, well, now you can be sourcing more. And so now you're starting to compound your time, right? You've bought something before, it's already on its way, it's already being produced without your time expense. Well, now you can be sourcing more, or even going to RA stores. You can be doing a lot more things as opposed to tying up your time. And it's hard to convince me, especially from a lot of the people that are going to be listening to this. It's hard to convince me that your time is worth less than $10, $15, $18 an hour, right? If you're listening to this in some capacity, if you have found us, it is my assumption, it's my hypothesis that you value your time more than the $18 that it is that you'd be paying a prep center, right? And so for me, it's an easy equation to resort to that prep center because it's not devaluing your time as much.
One thing that I kind of like pulled out of that in like that kind of a little bit of an origin story of just like how did you build that capital? It just made me think about the sellers that I see on the timeline. And I feel like a lot of the ones that are like capital constrained early end up running really good businesses because you're forced to learn every nuance of the business. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, because you have to get creative. And this kind of goes back to the whole, I forget what the theory, it's like a scientific proven theory. The profit first, kind of the thesis behind profit first is in theory, if there's something that's restricted and it means enough, you're going to find ways to take advantage and make it work, right? For example, if it's important enough for you to be looking good or feeling fit or whatever the case may be, well, you're going to make it a priority to eat right, exercise, be fit, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the capital thing is the same thing, right? If there's a restricted amount of capital and you need to maximize that because your priority is growing your business, well, now you're going to get creative, right? Maybe it's cross-listing over 4, 5, 6 different listings because that speeds up how much money you're actually going to make. It improves your buy box ownership because you're just naturally spread wider for the same amount of capital, right? Again, the FBM thing is obvious. There's a lot of things you can do. Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a loan from your friend, maybe it's asking your parents for equity. Those sorts of things. There's a lot of different ways you can get creative. Maybe it's payability, even though it's expensive, but it may be a fit for you, right? For the good sourcer that is very fluent with your numbers, that knows exactly what your margins are, exactly how much you're making per unit, payability may be the answer, right? Because for someone that's making 15, 16, 18% margin and they're confident in that, well, then it's a mathematical proven equation. It makes sense to give 3%, 4% of that margin of payability, because now you get your money back essentially immediately, right? Payability doesn't make sense for a lot of people because a lot of people don't know their numbers. It's hard for someone that doesn't know where their margin sits to give a definitive margin to someone else because you don't know where you're left, right? And so again, for a lot of people, payability may make sense for that specific person that's very good at sourcing, that has a high margin, that has capital restrictions. That may make sense. That's one way to get creative. There's other ways to do it, but again, there's something to be said about having a restraint and just letting that creativity flow, because there's a lot of cool things that'll happen, right? You meet friends in the marketplace. Maybe it's in a wholesale perspective, same sort of capital restriction. Well, now maybe you're more motivated to get out to network because you want to develop a group that you can place group orders with, right? You may have $8,000, $10,000, $15,000 to place on that PO, but if you take three other people that have that same 15,000, well, now you have 45,000, 60,000 to place one PO. You get better pricing. You have more authority in the marketplace. You have more credibility when you're approaching sales reps. Your profitability is going to be greater than one person with a 15K capital. Right? So those sorts of things, both from an OA perspective, wholesale perspective, creativity fuels a lot of growth when it's kind of forced upon, I guess you could say.
Garrett, I want to switch gears a little bit. The audience knows you as being one of the de facto folks in terms of wholesale. Knowing where the market is and knowing the landscape of Amazon today, would you still take the same path to go with wholesale, having a background as an analytical seller and knowing that there are potential for OA to have more opportunity to have safer account health? Would you have made the same decision to stay to wholesale, or do you think you would have been taken a different approach and stay in OA longer?
So I do think wholesale is the route for anyone that's looking to scale significantly, again, because your time expands so much more, your time compounds so much more. The time spent to place $100,000 PO and a $10,000 PO are the same, right? So you're going to make naturally more money with the same amount of time invested. However, the one nuance I would add is I would definitely be a advocate, I guess is the word, for brand direct, both from an account health perspective, but both from a productivity perspective, right? Because, for example, there's a lot of different tools, Smart Scout, Keeper Product Finder. There's a lot of tools that allow you to qualify brands for what you know them to be on Amazon. For example, right? If you want to focus on tools, if you want to focus on pets and household, or pets, if you want to focus on health and household, or maybe it's sports, or maybe it's hiking or camping, you can do that. You can segment pretty easily a specific niche, maybe that you want to target. Maybe you're a big hiker, you know a lot of nuance and brands in the hiking space, or maybe you just enjoy it, right? And you just want to have those conversations. You can focus on that. What you could also add to that is, okay, I want to focus on hiking. I want to only target brands that have 4 or more sellers on Amazon, right? So I know it's probably reseller friendly. I want to only focus on products and brands that are selling products that are more than like $15, $18, because I know I want to go prep center, because it's small and light, $9 is kind of hard to do with prep centers. And I want it to have a certain amount of volume. I can add those 4 filters with the products, with the brands that I'm looking at. I can have a list of those products within those brands within seconds, whichever tool I want to use. That's a good starting point, because I know when I do that outreach to a list of brands in hiking, I know they're qualified based on my criteria, given price point, given sales rank, amount of sellers that I'm comfortable with reaching out to, and a brand that exists on Amazon that does well, right? That doesn't have Amazon also in the picture. You can add that as a qualification as well. I have a list of 20, 50, 100 brands that meet my criteria that I can now reach out to. What's the next step is to actually make that progress, make that account. But when I do, everything's been qualified, and you'll kind of see where I'm going with this. Everything's already been qualified. The only thing that's left is initiating and adjusting and agreeing on a price. But guess what? That price point's the most malleable piece of that equation. You can't change velocity. You can't kick Amazon off. You can't make a brand be reseller friendly. But the one aspect you can change is price point. It's the most variable. It's the most malleable. And so at the end of the day, if everything else makes sense, you can probably work to adjust and come into a price point, whether it's buying more units, whether it's simply having more longevity on the account, whether it's bringing on 3 more people into the deal to be able to spend more to bring that price point down. There's things you can do to get that price point lower. And so if you save that price point to the end, you'll naturally have a lot more conversion. You'll have a lot more effectiveness with the outsourcing, the reaching, the sourcing you're doing. If you compare that to the distribution method that a lot of people are in, there's more risk, but it's harder to qualify the accounts, the companies that you're working with. But it's also less qualified activity, right? If I use the Google method that gets a lot of traction, right? I Google hiking accounts, hiking wholesalers in my area, right? I live in southeastern PA, hiking accounts in Philadelphia, or hiking accounts in Pennsylvania, hiking accounts in New York, New Jersey, Delaware, whatever the case may be. I'm going to get different companies in every single one of those searches. I'm going to have hundreds of companies at my disposal in 5-10 minutes, right? But what have I done? I haven't qualified a single thing. I'm going to do the outreach. I'm going to make those phone calls, send these emails, whatever the case may be, and I'm going to get a lot of accounts. But what happens when I get that account? What happens when I get that catalog? I don't know the products in there. I don't know the price points. I don't know the velocity. I don't know Amazon. I haven't qualified any of the things that I've done the other way, but I've already spent the manpower to do it. Sent the emails. I've done the follow-ups. I've made the phone calls. And so naturally, of course, kind of tying it back to your question, the distribution route is inherently more risky because of the companies. It's harder to prove the supply chain. A lot of nuance with that. A lot of people are going to kind of try and hide those sorts of things from you. But also, and probably more important in my discussion, in my playbook, is it's just harder to qualify those companies from a product, a value perspective, which makes it hard to quantify your time. It makes it hard to kind of judge the effectiveness of what you're doing, right? So if you compare the brand direct to the distribution method, brand, in my opinion, has more account health stability because you know exactly where you're getting it from. You know they want you on the listing. They've approved you to be on the listing. And in my mind, again, you've qualified all those things up front. So when you get to that last step, you're not going to be left with a catalog that you have no idea what's in it. And I think that's kind of the difference. That's kind of a long reason for your answer, but I think it really makes sense.
That's so spot on. And I think going through that journey myself on it, right, where you're doing that brand outreach and you go through, you know, the different catalogs with the times, the point that you just made there, you went through and you turn it on its head and you say, hey, I know exactly what I want, or I have a pretty good idea of the products that I want there. And now the conversation is so much different when you're reaching out to those brands and saying, hey, I want this amount at this quantity. And then you get to what you were just talking about. The very last step of the equation is the price point. So I really love that answer. And I think that's a really key point for anyone that's starting to think about wholesale, is approaching it in that lens. Now, as we start to look through and kind of double click into sourcing a little bit, what are some of your favorite ways to source today? And are they the same as the ones that you started out when you were beginning?
I mean, a lot of it is the same. Again, a lot of it differs, right? Because as you grow as a company, as a business, as an owner, one of the biggest things, one of the biggest levers you have as an Amazon seller is with more capital, you have more luxury to accept products that you probably wouldn't have, right? You have, and so assuming and kind of trying to create like a common denominator across all products are obviously created differently, right? And so a product over here may sell 5 times for $20. Product over here may sell $10 for $5, right? And a product over here may sell 50 times for $2, right? And so again, as a newer seller, it's hard to kind of compare and create a common denominator across all of those. And so as you mature as an Amazon seller, you start to realize and understand the value each product brings. And really, ultimately, the value is how much money, how much profit is it contributing to your business, right? And so at the end of the day, once you develop a kind of a threshold of profit number X that you want to say yes to, well, that's all that it really comes down to. And all products are going to kind of look differently. And so you can start to say yes to different sorts of products, right? Maybe you want to say yes to a bit of a more risky product that only generates maybe $1.50, $1.10, $1.20, but it sells thousands of times a month. You're still going to get to that same number of profitability, but there's a lot more risk because your margin is shrank, profit, your raw profit has shrunk. And so one of the biggest things as a kind of I've grown as an Amazon seller is I'm just probably more willing, and I have the luxury, and I've earned that luxury to be able to say yes to more things because I don't need to have every single dollar at max capacity and max effort. I don't need every single dollar going to a 30% ROI, 40%, 50, 60% ROI product, because I've spent time in the game and I know I just have earned that thing where it's all right. I have enough capital where I can start to spend all different types of money, all contributing to the bottom line the same. So I think that's one of the big things. And also it's just understanding like different sorts of risk, different sorts of products, how they operate, right? Obviously shying away from things that are a little bit more risky, whether it be from a return perspective, an authenticity perspective, right? Whether it be from a brand perspective, a lot of those different things you could become more aware of. And so again, you become more understanding of account health and how important that actually is. And then from a second perspective, right? You just naturally can potentially lower your margin a bit, right? Because as your wallet grows, right, with the North Star being your profit per month, well, you can ultimately make your sourcing a lot easier, right? You start your career maybe at an 18% profit margin, 20%, 15% profit margin, right? And that's great, right? Maybe with the goal of maybe $5,000 per month that you want to make. That's your goal. That's your commitment for the business, right? But we all agree that products at 18% margin are a lot harder to find than products at 12, right? Products at 15% margin are a whole lot harder to find than products at 8 and 9 and 10. And so ultimately, with the main North Star being to increase your profit number, well, what happens when you have the luxury to be able to spend 200,000 as opposed to 50, right? The 50%, the $50,000 seller that wants to make $10,000 or $5,000 has to work a whole lot harder than the dude with $150,000. And I'm hoping I'm not boring people that wants to make 20,000, right? So it all kind of boils down to how much money do you have to spend, right? What's your risk tolerance? And how efficiently can you find those sorts of products? As you gain more money, you can obviously have more authority in the wholesale marketplace, which has come over time as well. I don't know if I completely answered your question, but.
Well, I mean, I think that what you kind of highlighted is that at the beginning of your journey, you're fighting for market context and you're just going to scan everything. And then you're eventually just going to shift that and put it on its head and be like, no, I'm looking for 4 different things. Let me go hunt that through data. But you need to understand what that data means so that you have context of the market and so that you can be effective in that space.
Yeah.
100%.
I agree.
So transitioning a little bit, you've seen a lot of Amazon sellers, a lot of new journeys, a lot of people starting. Where do you think people get hung up the most in that process?
Oh, I think one of the biggest things is lack of patience and lack of persistence, right? Those are the two big, I think those are probably qualitatively the two biggest keys to success, right? Someone that doesn't have the patience to see it through, and someone that doesn't have the persistence to be patient with all the annoyances that Amazon has to offer, right? You're going to deal with account health issues. You're going to deal with returns being fraudulent, right? You're going to deal with products being lost. You're going to deal with a lot of different things in this space, right? We're playing in Amazon sandbox, but in return, we have the biggest marketplace at our exposure, right? At our fingertips, right? So that it's a give and take there, right? So you have to understand that there's a lot of headaches that are going to come. There's a lot of annoyances that are going to come. Because there's going to be a lot of things that you don't agree with seller support, with all these different things. And right, so the persistence to work through all of those, to see the light in the tunnel, to see the bigger vision, see the mission, to be like, yeah, this is annoying, right? The next couple of days will probably be annoying. I have to submit 50 invoices or whatever the case may be. But I also understand that this is something that I want, and I see the vision. I see it working for other people. I know I can do it for myself. So it's persistence, but also patience in knowing that whatever your hiccup is, it's going to take time, right? Whether it's product sourcing, whether it's capital, whether it's both, whether it's just not having the enough accounts, right? Whatever it is, it takes time, it takes persistence, and it just takes that drive, right? Wholesale, for example, the coolest thing I think in the space, the coolest thing from a wholesale perspective is one account can change your life. 100%, one account can change your business, can change your life, can change everything. But you don't know if that's on the next phone call or the 500th. You don't know if that one is coming tomorrow or in 3 weeks or 2 months, right? And so you don't know what time you pick up the phone could potentially change your life, but you know it's inevitable. You know it's coming. And so that's kind of the patience piece that just keeps you iterating, keeps you improving your craft, keeps you evolving, keeps you meeting more people to open you up to more different opportunities. So I think those are the two biggest things. The people that lack either one of those things, you need them both, are going to struggle, right? The person that lacks persistence or patience is going to try and take shortcuts, is going to ship socks that are, non-dry fit as dry fit, or ship a different color, or ship a different size, or whatever the case may be, or ship 3 days late or 4 days late or whatever. The person that takes shortcuts is ultimately going to lose, right? The person that tried to take advantage of the customer is ultimately going to lose. And the person that doesn't have the persistence, that doesn't have the callous to work through the things that all of us have done, is also going to lose. They're not going to last. So you need both.
So this actually transitions well into something I was going to ask. Patience, persistence, obviously the only Ironman that I'm aware of in the Amazon community. How has endurance training helped in your journey and like allowed you to be successful?
Oh man, I can talk about this for hours, bro. I can talk about this for hours. It's ultimately the delayed gratification, right? Because I think I will die on this hill, and that's why you're running one in November, right? One of the biggest, the quickest, most effective ways to change your business and change your life is to run a marathon. Doesn't matter how quickly you run it. Doesn't matter, right, what your time is. It just matters that you sign up for something that you can't accomplish in 1 day or 1 week or even 1 month. But if you keep showing up, you're going to do it, right? And so if you put that race on the calendar, you come up with some sort of a plan, right? And you just show up every day, right? 1 run is not going to make or break anything. 2 runs is not going to make or break anything, nor is 3, right? 1 week of training won't make or break anything, but you compound that effort. You show up Monday, you show up Tuesday, you show up Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Over the course of 3, 4, 5, 6 months, A, you're in a whole lot better of a shape. You're expanding your lifespan. But B, you change your person, you change your personality, right? You're callousing yourself. You're callousing yourself to do things you don't want to do, right? And that not only affects your business, it affects every single thing in your life, right? It calluses you, right? It calluses you for the phone call of one of your family members die, right? It calluses you for the job firing that you get, or whatever the case may be. It calluses you for that because you're doing hard things on the daily basis that you don't want to do. So you develop that inherent confidence in the confidence that you can overcome those sorts of things, but you can also deal with it with ease, right? Yeah, it gets a little bit easier. It doesn't stop being hard, but it gets a little bit easier. And so committing to something that's way, 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 way in the distance, but knowing you have to show up to actually accomplish it is one thing. And it's ultimately what leads to success in business, but it's also the positive effect that it has on your life. Just knowing that and building that confidence for yourself that I know I really want to eat that thing. I know it's probably not good for me, but I'm going to avoid it, right? I know I really don't want to show up for that workout, but I know I have to do it, so I'm going to do it anyway. And again, especially for those folks, that work 9 to 5, it's going to suck in the beginning, right? Because you're going to get home from work, right? You're going to eat. Maybe you have a wife or kids or whatever. You're going to spend the family time. And now you look up, it's 9 o'clock, right? And maybe the Yankees are playing, or there's an NBA game on, or whatever the case may be. But you have to, and you really should be sourcing, or you have a shipment to send out, or whatever the case may be. Man, you're super not going to want to do that. And there's going to be 1,000 reasons to not do that. But again, that marathon, right? That whatever it is, builds a little bit of a callus. And the longer you do it, the bigger the callus is to actually make that movement to get the job done. Again, the biggest thing is just the powerful thought to be like, yeah, I super don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Let's look into that one a little bit further, right? So what would you recommend to someone that, you've come across a lot of different sellers on your journey, folks that are in that boat? They're like, hey, I've been doing this. I've been in a corporate gig for a little while. What are some things that you kind of give as like motivation to have them remove that limited belief of being able to say, hey, I need to just do this?
The first thing is you got to build momentum, and momentum is going to be the hardest thing to do in the beginning. And so you got to develop that peer pressure, the community that it's going to force you to do that, right? You almost have to manufacture that momentum in the beginning. And so momentum from a personal perspective is really hard to generate, right? It's really hard to get that snowball going on a flat surface. You just need that little bit of downslope where you can start to push that snowball down further, quicker, easier, right? And so a lot of times in that kind of the way that looks is building yourself people around you that are doing the same sort of thing. Makes it easier. Groupthink is something we're all susceptible to, right? The 2 people that we talk to the most, the 3 people that we talk to the most are doing this thing, are making the sacrifice that I know I should be doing. Well, it's harder for you to make that decision, not do it, right? If the 2 people you talk to the most or passing up on that, whatever that thing is, well, you're probably going to join that, right? Because A, you don't want to be left behind. FOMO is a real thing. And B, they're manufacturing the momentum, so you don't have the energy too, right? You're allowing them to kind of fight on your behalf when maybe you're tired or maybe you don't want to, whatever the case may be. So A, it's knowing that there's a lot of things working against you as a 9-to-5 worker that's probably older with a family and wife and kids and whatever. You have to surround yourself with people that are going to make it just a bit easier, right? So that momentum is a big thing. And also just allowing yourself to be able to source with people, right? For you to put in an hour, for someone else to put in an hour, a third person to put in an hour, and all those hours are not necessarily the same, right? So you're putting an hour of work and ultimately getting 3 hours of output, right? Assuming you organize your work and you're doing things they're proactive together, right? So you put an hour input, 3 hours output. Well, the math is easy, right? Obviously, you're multiplying yourself with a group of 3 people that, of course, are not competing against each other in the marketplace. It's too big for that to ever be possible. So for that corporate worker, 9-to-5 worker, you have to manufacture momentum by creating a community. It doesn't have to be big, just a couple of people that are in the same person. An 18-year-old doesn't do you any good. A 19-year-old, a 20-year-old, a dropout, whatever the case may be, doesn't do any good. You need people that are in your position so you can resonate and, again, use that to build and manufacture that momentum. And you need to start working together as a unit to start to do the main thing, the main lever that's going to take your business from A to B, and that's sourcing, right? It's sourcing and buying profitable, warm products. That's the biggest thing early. And assuming you're a 9-to-5 worker, if you are a 9-to-5 worker, I'm hoping you have some sort of a capital built up. Going back to where we started this whole conversation, you have an inherent advantage because you don't have to try and create dollars out of nothing. You have the luxury to be able to ship to that prep center, so you don't have to devalue your time in that regard. You have the ability to maybe not FBM if you don't want to. If you have $70,000 in the bank, $100,000, whatever it is, we have a whole lot of authority in the marketplace to now just buy profitable stuff. And that's something you can learn in a day, 2 days, 3 days, right? Go to my YouTube channel. Everyone has a YouTube channel doing live sourcing, right? The sourcing is not the issue, especially when you have people to do it. And so that's what I would do is create that momentum, create people, create efficiencies in your workflow with a prep center and people sourcing with you, maybe a VA to help. Multiply your time because that's going to be probably the thing that doesn't exist with that you're lacking the most. And then just iterate and just continue to grow it like that.
100%. Yeah, I always think that like the people that are willing to be cringy for like a month or two on Twitter or Instagram will then figure it out, become less cringe, and then they'll be like so much further along than the person that just never started.
I mean, you don't even have to. You can even let others do the hard work, right? So if I'm 9-to-5 worker with a family and I'm 45 years old,
Yeah.
even if I've put out 0 content, I could just like I'm sourcing products, I can source 15 people that look like, or not look like me, but like that actor in my position.
Yep.
If I send every single one of them a DM that's thought out, that's direct, that's actually moving emotionally, 3 of them are going to be like, yeah, you can come to our next call, or yeah, let's work together. Let's see if we can work. You don't even have to use that as a crutch if you don't want to. You can just send cold DMs to a whole bunch of people that aren't robotic, that actually appeal to some sort of emotion, right? And you can kind of find your people that way. And then you can kind of let that just kind of instill yourself into a community like that. There's also Discords, right? It's just so easy to find people, right? Obviously, there's things like this where you can listen to people talk like myself and just get a sense of personality that way. There's free Discords, like you guys have a Discord, 9-to-5 Discord. That's awesome, right? Obviously, Miles and Warner have one. There's 10 other ones that are from people that are reputable that have made a Discord that people just interact, right? Obviously, you can pay for some sort of a course that you're forced to interact. It's just so easy to meet people like yourself. That shouldn't be an excuse, and that should only be something that just expedites your growth.
Yeah, I think that you hit on 2 of the points, right? You talked about removing limiting beliefs in terms of being able to stay committed to the journey. It's the same thing with socials, right? The first time you pick up the camera, the first time you send that cold DM that's out there, the first time you reach out to that brand that you're trying to get products from, it's all going to feel awkward when you do it. And the only way to do it is to continue to build those reps up. So I think that's a really important point. Where do you see in the social space, being a pioneer, being a person that's been in there and has been in front of the camera for some time, Where do you see it going moving forward? Do you see it being more the same of it is, or do you see social media continue to evolve?
It's a good question, right? Because the thing is, the content exists everywhere, right? Everything you need to know is currently on the internet. You just have to find it. Man, that's a really, really, really good question. So like it's going to continue to evolve in the sense the tools are going to evolve, right? Amazon as a marketplace is going to evolve. But I think it is evolving, right? We see just the accounts changing right before our eyes, right? People are being more active, people are being more proactive to learn about each other, everyone else. People are being more proactive to put yourself out there. You're seeing all sorts of different walks of life putting out the same sort of content. So I think it is evolving in that way in terms of like, it's so easy. At the end of the day, it is so easy to find people that are doing the same thing from even your location, right? If you want to meet up with someone in the same sort of state, there's probably 10, 15, 50 people in that same state. You just have to find them, right? And I think that's the biggest way it's evolving is that it's just like there's so much of a diverse populace of people that are doing and putting out this sort of content, talking about this sort of weird ass thing that we all do, that it makes it so easy to find the people that you want to do or that you want to interact with. But in terms of like the content's all out there, right? What you can find what you need to learn, what you want to learn so easily. But I think the biggest thing is just going to be, it's going to continue to be so much easier to find people to grow with, and to learn about the tools that are ultimately being created for the marketplace, because a whole lot of talking heads like us are going to continue to talk about that.
100%. Well, Garrett, thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure. It's been a fun combo. We got the threes. Where can people find you at?
Everywhere. BuyBoxBandit podcast I do with Miles. My Twitter, Instagram is below. I have a personal YouTube, Garrett Gorel at YouTube. You can find me there. But yeah, I'm in a bunch of Discords. I'm in these guys' Discords. I'm everywhere. It's not hard to find me.
No, it is not. But thanks for coming on into the audience. We'll catch you in the next one.
Yes, sir.